Hi everyone and welcome to another October reading vlog. I'm trying to do spooky shit all this month if you haven't noticed already. This reading vlog is going to focus on vampires. So I picked out 4 books that all have center vampires and this week I'm going to read them. So let's go over the books. I have no idea what order I'm going to be reading these in, but let's just go through them quickly. The first book that I have is S.T. Gibson's A Dowry of Blood. This book is like a retelling of Dracula, and it follows one of Dracula's brides. That's all I know. I think it's written in like journal format, so that's what I've got for this one. Next, we have Carmilla by Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu, and edited by Carmen Maria Machado, who's one of my favorite authors. This is the original vampire story. Apparently, this came before Dracula. Apparently, it's also sapphic. Lots to love about this one, just from what I've heard. Then we have a beefy one, but it's not actually beefy. Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire. This is the entire series, so that's why it's so big. I have no idea if I'm going to like this enough to continue with the entire series, but I have the whole thing. I have no idea what this is about. I saw the movie. Sorry, I got distracted by someone on the road. I saw the movie when I was really young, and I remember liking it, I think. So, I feel like everyone's been talking about it, especially with the TV show that's out now, and I would love to be able to watch the TV show, but of course, I have to read the book first. And the last book we have, which is kind of like a random one, is The Beautiful by Renee Ahdieh. This is a YA vampire story, and that's all I know. So, as you can tell, I'm not like greatly familiar with all these books. I do think the first one I should probably read, oh no, Everything Fell. That's great. First one I should probably read is Carmilla. But to be honest, I'm just coming off of that vlog where I read all those classic books, and I feel like I kind of need a break before I get to an old-timey book again. So sadly, even though this is the original one, I'm not going to be reading it first, because I can't do that to myself right now. And so, everything's falling around my feet. I'm not used to standing as I film. And so, I think I'm going to pick up A Dowry of Blood first. This is the one that I'm kind of most excited about, just because I've heard the most people talk about it and really love it. So yeah, I'm going to get to reading, and I will update you once I have something to say. By the way, if you haven't noticed, I have my new bookshelves behind me. There's actually 3. You can only see 2 right now. Let me know if you want a bookshelf tour, or if you just want like a quick little go-through of like how things are organized. I really don't know what to film, so let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you. I'm going to get reading. See ya. I'm on page 120 of A Dowry of Blood, so I figured it's about time that I give you a little bit of synopsis. Which is, I feel like it's hard to do because I feel like not much has actually happened in this book. So you're following our main character, who in the beginning is nameless. The opening scene, you find her dying on the ground. There's been like some massive war, and she's a victim of it, as well as her whole family. And this dark man comes up to her and essentially tells her that he can like save her life, whatever. She agrees to it. He's a vampire. He bites her. And then she drinks his blood, and now she's a vampire too. He takes her back to his home, and they're living there in like opulence. She never sees anyone else but him. They have a very like toxic relationship where he's like everything to her and he kind of controls her, but she's okay with it because she's just infatuated with him. And then the plague comes, and then they have to go somewhere else, and then they go somewhere else again and they meet this girl named Magdalena. And so it's just like, that's pretty much all that has happened. And as you can tell, it's just not much. It's just not much of a plot right now. I think the focus in this book is much more on the writing, which, like, I don't want to say it's lyrical because I don't feel like it's lyrical, but it is certainly, like, trying very hard to be, like, eloquent, if that makes sense. And I kind of hate saying that, too, because it feels like I'm, like, saying something bad about it. I just don't think it's personally working for me at this moment. I can see why people really like this and really like the writing style, but just personally, it's not my cup of tea. Like, I think about a book like On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong, and how people like talk about that being very like poetical and very lyrical writing, and I'm obsessed with that writing. But the writing in here, it just feels like it's like trying very hard to be like that, and I don't know. I don't think it's fully working for me. I think also I wish there was more going on here, other than just like the relationship between her. He gives her the name Constanta, by the way, so that's what she's called for the rest of the book. But it's really just the relationship between her and him, who she only ever calls my lord, so we don't have his name. but that's the focus of the book. It does get kind of steamy at times too, so if you're interested in reading this, know that. Oh, there's also the very beginning of the book, which I thought was cool. There's a list of trigger warnings. So if this is a book you're interested in reading, but you do need trigger warnings, just know that the author has provided them, which is great. But yeah, I'm just like not really feeling it yet. It's pretty easy to get through, especially like I just filmed that video where I read a bunch of classic horror books. So it feels really nice to get back to just like a normal book after that. I feel like I'm reading it a lot faster and it's just a lot easier in my brain. So I'm enjoying it in that way. But I don't think, like right now I'm feeling like maybe 3 stars, maybe like 2.5. So it's not like really up there in terms of enjoyment yet. So that's where we are for this. And I'll update you when I'm finished it. See ya. I've just finished A Diary of Blood, and I think it's just not for me. I ended up giving it 2.5 stars, so like right down the middle, very average. And for me, like 3 stars is saying that I like something, so I don't even really know if I liked this, to be honest. It was very readable, very easy to get through, which I really did appreciate. I just thought the book was boring. Like the main focus was to be on the abusive relationship, and I've read books where that's like the focus before. Like I think like My Dark Vanessa, like that's what comes to mind instantly. Books like that, and I've liked those books and I thought they were great books, but this one just didn't do it for me. I just thought it was kind of boring. I think they didn't really interact with like the setting very much, which could have been cool because you're traveling through all these different time periods, but other than like the plague affecting them, like that never really affected anything in the plot. And again, the writing just felt forced to me. Like, I felt like she really wanted to make it flowery and, like, awe-inspiring. And it just felt like she was, like, trying so hard and, like, forcing it out of herself rather than it just feeling like, naturally pretty. So I just am left not really liking this book, but not, like, disliking it either, if that makes sense. So 2.5 is, like, perfectly in the middle. That's where I'm sticking for this one. So that's my view of A Diary of Blood. Not a great review, because I just don't have much to say about it. I'm sorry. So, let's move on to the next book. Next, I think this took me a little bit to figure out, right? Like, because I have Carmilla the Beautiful and Interview with the Vampire left, and I wasn't sure which one to pick up, and I really had to think about it because Carmilla I feel like I should pick up as soon as possible because, again, it's like the OG vampire book. But then I just wasn't really feeling it after I read all those classics. So I think I'm going to read that after this one. And I've decided that the next book I'm going to pick up, I can't hold it right, is Interview with the Vampire. This is obviously the whole Vampire Chronicles, so it's pretty beefy, pretty big. So this is the first 3 at least. I'm only going to be reading the first one for this video. And then we'll see if I like it enough to carry on. I hope I do, because that would be nice to get into a new series. What I know about this book is basically absolutely nothing. I know it's an interview with a vampire. I'm pretty sure it's told like in an interview format. Other than that, I know that the movie had handsome male vampires in it. I'm getting a feeling that like all these vampire books are just gonna be horny. Cause A Diary of Blood was definitely very, very horny. And I have a feeling this one's gonna be too, just because the only thing I remember from the movie is like handsome men. Maybe that's just a me thing. I don't know. I'm gonna get to reading though, and I'll update you when I have something to say about it. See ya. I am 76 pages into Hi, Saphira. You want to join us? You want to say hi? Hi. She's nothing to say. I'm sorry. Anyway, as I was saying, I am 76 pages into Interview with the Vampire. So I'm here to give you a little description and then to do a little book haul because I bought some books today. Just a mini little one though. Anyway, sorry, Saphira's distracting me. Hi. See, she likes this book. Anyway, so essentially this book is following our main character. I think his name is Louis, and he's telling the story of how he became a vampire. So essentially this vampire called Lestat, I think, turned him into a vampire because he owned this plantation in Louisiana and he really wanted his money, essentially. But the issue is that soon the slaves of his plantation became aware that something was going on and they wanted to like stop them and kill them. So both Louis and Lestat had to flee in the middle of the night, and now they're kind of like on the road to New Orleans trying to figure out what they're going to do next. That's pretty much the gist of it. I'm not too far into it, but I don't want to get much further and then give you synopsis because I don't want to spoil anything. So that's all I'll say for right now. But let's get into the 4 books that I bought today because I'm pretty excited about it. I had to go to Verizon, and then Verizon couldn't help me, but I got to Verizon an hour earlier than it opened, and there was a Barnes & Noble right next to it. So I had to go in, and I told myself I was only going to get 1 book, but then I wasn't able to stop myself, and I bought 4 books. So let's get into it. I've got them right here. The first 2 books were both on a buy one, get one 50% off little shelf. So I picked up 2 of these because of that. But essentially, the little table that they're on were all about, like, animals. And I am not a sciencey person. Like, I honestly can't understand most forms of science. It just does not stick in my brain. It doesn't work. I'm a humanities girl. But the only type of science that does work for me in my brain is about animals. Like, I took primatology in undergrad, loved that, loved learning about monkeys, especially their social behavior. So I bought these 2 books. Actually, only one is about animals, I guess, but they're both about, like, the natural world. The first book I got is The Soul of an Octopus, A Surprising Exploration to the Wonder of Consciousness by Cy Montgomery. I see you, Saphira. This book, basically, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory based on the title. It talks about octopi and their consciousness. And it follows this naturalist that talks about a bunch of individual octopi who all octopuses. It's octopuses, not octopi. I'm so sorry. That all have very different personalities. And he kind of, like, travels around the world to see what they behave like and what they're like personality-wise. And that just sounds so cool to me. And apparently there's some lessons about, like, consciousness in here that comes from these octopuses. And I don't know, I was just really interested in it, so I had to pick it up. And then the second book that was on that table actually is about animals now that I'm thinking about it, but it's about fungi. And this book is Entangled Life, How Fungi Make Our Worlds, Change Our Minds, and Shape Our Futures by Merlin Sheldrake. And I actually saw this book on Book Outlet, like, after it first came out, and I wanted to read it then, but I didn't manage to get an order in before it was out of stock. So I bought it now, and I'm very excited to learn about fungi. I don't know why. So those were the 2 nonfiction books I got, and the other 2 are fiction, I promise. The first of which is Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. I actually did buy a copy of this book off of Pango Books not too long ago, but I accidentally got a large print copy, so it's just humongous, and I don't want to read it. Like, for some reason, even though I know it's the same book and I should probably just read it, I don't want to read it in that format and I want to get rid of it. So I bought this one instead at Barnes & Noble. And they have this special edition where it's all rainbow. Like, isn't that so cute? I had to get it. I wanted a special little edition. And this book I actually don't know much about. I know it's a retelling of David Copperfield, but it takes place in Appalachia and it talks a lot about, like, addiction. And that's all I know. But I've heard so many people praise this, and I'm, like, certain I'm gonna love it. And then the very last book I got is The Only One Left by Riley Sager. This book essentially takes place in the 1900s. That's such a broad date range. Like, that wasn't helpful for me to say at all. But it starts in 1929, where the Hope family is murdered, and only one family member remains, and her name is Lenora, and everyone is convinced that she was the one who killed her whole family. And then after that, it fast forwards in time to 1983, when Lenora is, like, old and dying, and a home aid person comes to take care of her, and slowly Lenora starts to tell the story of, like, what actually happened to her family that night. I've never read Riley Sager before, but I've heard such good things about him, and I want to start picking up more mystery thrillers, so I thought this would be a good place to start. I'm not going to be able to read this until, like, November, since I'm doing a lot of vlogs this month, but I am excited to pick this up as soon as possible. So there you go. This is my little mini book haul, because I couldn't stop myself, even though I shouldn't spend any more money on books. And that is the synopsis of Interview with the Vampire so far. I'm actually really liking this book. I really wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it, but I'm thinking I might like it enough to continue on with the whole series, so that's pretty exciting. And other than that, I don't really have any commentary yet, because I'm only, like, 70 pages into it. I'm going to keep on reading, and I'll update you when I have something else to say. Okay, I have not finished Interview with the Vampire yet, but I do have some thoughts that I didn't say before that I feel like I need to say. So here I am. Essentially, right after the part that I summarized for you, a new thing happened in the book, as new things do happen in books. And essentially, Louis fed on, like, a 5-year-old girl, And then later on, Lestat went and took this 5-year-old girl and turned her into a vampire. It's not a spoiler because it did really happen before like page 100, so I'm not really counting it as like a big spoiler. And like all this is okay, you know, child vampire, kind of cool, whatever. But the thing is that like years and years and years and years passed to the point where like this is now a grown adult in a 5-year-old girl's body. And a really weird thing is happening where Louis kept referring to her as being sensual. Ooh, I don't know. I don't think I like that. I think it makes me uncomfortable. Like, he has used that word multiple times to describe her. And it's like, on one end, yes, it is like a fully grown woman. Like, she's probably 100 years old by this point or something like that. But she still has the body of a 5-year-old, and he's just describing like the way she's laying and calling it sensual and like saying she's a sensual look in her. I just don't like it. It's kind of uncomfortable and weird. So I felt like I had to say something about that. Because I don't know if I'll be including that like in the wrap up for this book. But I'm not sure how I feel about that. I'd love to discuss that a little bit in the comments. Like, did you read this book and what did you think about that specifically? Because I don't know if it's going to go somewhere that I won't be comfortable with after this. I don't know where it's going with the 5-year-old girl body. That's all I have to say. I'm a little uncomfortable. A little bit not liking that part at all. But it is like kind of an interesting thing, you know, the whole being like a young body but like a fully developed mind. Like, I guess that kind of is like Edward Cullen because like he died as a teenager. But at least he was 17 and he wasn't 5. I don't know. I feel weird about this. That's all I gotta say. See you soon. I finished reading Interview with a Vampire, so let me share my thoughts. I guess I don't have too many thoughts now that I'm thinking about it. I do think that this is a very unique vampire novel. Like, I really liked that Louis spent the novel kind of grappling with what he is and the evil he thought he was, and just like struggling to retain his human nature and his human conscience. I just also thought it was really interesting the search for like other vampires and how not all vampires were like them. I'm trying to keep it vague so I'm not spoiling things. But all in all, I just thought it was a really unique and interesting story. A lot of people on Goodreads were talking about this like it's a trashy novel, and I don't really agree with that. I'm not really sure why even they thought it was trashy, to be honest. Because I just think it's such a solid work of fiction. Like, maybe they just thought it was trashy just because it's vampires. Like, there's nothing trashy that really happens in this book. It's not sexual. It's just a straightforward story about a guy. So I did end up giving this 3.5 stars. 2 things that held me back from making it like a 4-star rating are, first of all, I didn't really feel a 4-star rating. So maybe 3 things that held it back. That was number 1 and probably the largest. But secondly, like I said before, I don't really like how they're describing the 5-year-old body as sensual. I understand that word doesn't always mean sexual, but it mainly does, you know? Like, when people use that word, they're usually using it to say something like that. So I didn't like that. The third thing, which I forgot to mention before, is that he's a slave owner. Why are we not talking about that? I mean, it's hard because I try to rack my brain to understand like why she would make her main character a slave owner and never talk about it. And partially I was like, well, maybe she did that because she just wanted him to be really wealthy in that era. But from what I know personally about a lot of America's history, slave owners often weren't actually wealthy. Like, they were kind of living off of debt most of the time, like, because being a plantation farmer isn't necessarily something that gives a steady income. Like, I know a lot of like the American founding fathers that were considered wealthy, they were more like land wealthy than anything else, and they're often like living with these large debts, and that's even though they furnished their houses beautifully, like they're living in debt. So I don't think that she necessarily had to make him a slave owner to make him wealthy, and I don't like that he was a slave owner because I'm a rational human being that detests slave owners. So that was another thing holding it back from me really liking this. And they also never really like grappled with it. Like, his slaves tried to kill him, which, like, good for them. They were doing the right thing, to be honest. And then like after that, like he had all these thoughts about like being an evil person because he was killing people. But the whole like slavery thing never touched his mind, even as he lived through the centuries. I don't know. Maybe I'm being very picky. I just didn't like that part. I do think that I would continue on to the Vampire Lestat. Like, I'm not totally dying to read it right now, to be honest, but I do think I will hold on to this collection of the novels, and I do think I will continue on with it. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on Interview with the Vampire. I'm moving on to picking up The Beautiful by Renee Ahdieh. This is a YA book, which gives me some pause because I don't really like YA anymore. But I do still want to give it a chance. I had it on my shelf. I got it from Book Outlet for like 99 cents or something like that. So I am going to read it. A funny thing is that this also takes place in New Orleans. I don't know how to say that city's name, which Interview with the Vampire also took place in the beginning. So that's interesting. I have no idea what this book is about. What I do know is I've read, what is it called? It was like The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee Ahdieh. And it was a very like romance focused book. So I don't know if this one's going to be the same, but we'll see. We'll see if my prediction of the horny vampires comes true. It didn't come true in Interview with the Vampire. He was just a normal guy. There was no horniness in that book other than the 5-year-old being described as sensual. And I kind of don't think there's going to be any in Carmilla either. So maybe it's just A Diary of Blood that was super horny. I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to get to reading and I'll update you when I have something to say about The Beautiful. See ya. Okay, I'm about 100 pages into The Beautiful. That's what it's called, right? Yeah. And it's time for me to give you a synopsis. So essentially, this book is following our main character, Celine, who is leaving Paris. Well, she's already left Paris at the beginning of the book. She's on like a ship. She's left Paris and she's going to New Orleans. We learn that she is actually fleeing from Paris because she killed a man there. So she's going to New Orleans to live in this convent. And that's the gist. I mean, in the beginning of the book, most of the girls in the convent are like assigned to a different task, whether it be like a teacher or working at the hospital. Celine, her friend Pippa, and another person whose name I forget are assigned to work to raise money for the convent. Is that what it is? Is it a convent? I'm pretty sure that's what it said. But I also feel like there's something wrong with that because they're not becoming nuns. They're just like living in there. Anyway, so they're at this market and they're trying to sell stuff. And Celine was an apprentice for like a dressmaker in Paris before she had to flee because she killed someone. And so she created these like handkerchiefs or something. Some lady comes by and buys all of the handkerchiefs and talks about how like greatly they're crafted and then asks Celine if she can make a dress for her. Celine says yes, but she's actually not supposed to leave the convent at all at night. So she has to get it approved by the head person at the convent. I'm giving such a bad description. Oh my god. So she has to get it approved. She eventually approves it because Pippa speaks up and Pippa says she'll go with her. And then when they're on the way to this mysterious lady's abode, they come across these two men who are fighting a man in an alley. And one of these guys is beautiful. And Celine is immediately like attracted to him, but she also is mad at him because she thinks he's like beating up a poor defenseless man. So she confronts him about it and he says like he isn't. Anyway, then she goes to this lady's house. It turns out to be a restaurant. Turns out the people of different races are intermixing there. Turns out this lady's wearing pants instead of a dress. So that's pretty much all that's happened. It doesn't sound too interesting because it's not really that interesting. But this is also interspersed with chapters from someone talking about who has like killed someone at a pier and is talking about like how he's chasing down this girl and she's her prey and I don't know. She's his prey. I don't know what's going on. This is okay so far. I mean, I just read 100 pages when I was on the treadmill, so if I'm looking kind of gross, that's why. I just took a break to film this little update. One thing I will say is that something's really getting on my nerves, and it's the fact that Renee Ahdieh constantly has little dialogue bits in a different language and doesn't like provide any translation. And personally, it's fine for me most of the time because most of the time it's in French and I know a little bit of French. So I can read those parts, but I can't imagine how frustrating it must be to be a reader with no knowledge of French who has to constantly read French on the page for like no reason either. It's not like there's one scene where this woman is talking to this guy in Spanish and no translation is provided and I can't speak Spanish. But it seems like that's more because Celine can't speak Spanish, so they're like talking and Celine doesn't know what's happening. So that makes sense. But to constantly have French interspersed into the book for no reason at all, it just doesn't make sense. And it's just frustrating. Even I, who can read a little bit of French, am frustrated by it. So I know that's going to continue, but I wish it won't. That's what all I have to say. So I'll see you soon once I finish this. This book is like over 400 pages actually. It's deceptively small, but it's pretty beefy in reality. I think this is going to be the longest one I've read for this video. So, yeah, and I guess like the guy who's like stalking that girl is a vampire, but we don't know yet. But it's supposed to be about vampires, so he better be. Anyway, bye. I finished The Beautiful by Renee Ahdieh. Oh, I should hold it over here. Here we go. So let's talk about my thoughts. I will say, first of all, that I've pretty much like outgrown YA as a genre, so I think that's mainly why this wasn't a new favorite for me. Obviously, YA tends to have like a lot of different tropes and tends to kind of use the same plot points a lot. And I don't want to say specifically like what's in this book because I don't want to ruin it for anyone. But I did find that it was pretty predictable because of these things. I also thought that the writing was pretty cringy at certain points. Like, there's one point towards the beginning of the book where Celine is talking to Bastian, and out of nowhere she just blurts out, "Don't fall in love with me." Like, what? Who would say something like that? Especially, like, just randomly, with no context making that make sense? Like, it's just stupid. And she says it again later on, too, and it's just like, okay, we get it. Like, you think you're hot shit. And then, of course, you have, like, everyone thinks she's so beautiful, and all the boys want to be with her. It's just like, okay, I get it. I get it. You're a main female character in a YA book. And I will also say that, like I said before, I gave a really bad explanation for this book. But like I did say before, there's, like, every now and then there's a random chapter from the point of view of the villain, and you don't know who he is, and he's just, like, saying dark things and being obviously the villain and describing, like, wanting to kill people and stalking people and stuff. And those just did not feel necessary. I mean, I could have maybe having them, like, a few times in there, but I don't know. It was just, the reveal of who it was interesting, I will say. I didn't predict that. But overall, I just found those chapters to be kind of silly, and it just wasn't for me. That being said, I'm gonna give this 3 stars, because I don't feel like I should rate it lower just because I've outgrown YA personally. I still think it was a fun and an easy read, although at times it was confusing, especially with what, like, the Court of Lions is doing. Like, I still don't really understand. And I don't know if I'll continue on with the series. Like, maybe if I see it on Book Outlet, like, the sequel on Book Outlet for, like, $1, maybe I'll get it. But it's not something that I'm rushing to finish. I'm probably not even gonna hold on to this. I'm probably gonna unhaul this in my next video. So there you go. That is The Beautiful by Renee Ahdieh. So we have one more book left to read in this video, and that is Carmilla by Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu, and it is edited by Carmen Maria Machado, which I'm so excited about. This one's only about 140 pages, and I don't know much about it. What I do know is that it's supposed to be like the original vampire story told even before Dracula, that Dracula was inspired by, and there's lesbians in it apparently. That's all I've heard. I've heard that it's sapphic, and then it's the original vampire. So that's all I know going into this. I'm kind of hoping that I'll be able to finish this today because it'd be really nice to wrap up this video and move on to the next vlog for October. I will update you if I finish it, regardless of what time I finish it. If it's today or tomorrow, we'll see. See ya. I've been out running errands for like 8 straight hours and I've just sweat all my makeup off. So don't judge me for how I look right now because I cannot do anything about it. But I just want to finish up this video very quickly. So the last book I read for this video was Carmilla by Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu, edited by Carmen Maria Machado. So Carmilla essentially follows this young girl who lives in this big mansion on the outskirts of a town. So she's very isolated and alone, doesn't have many friends. And then one day there's like a carriage accident near her house and a young girl is injured. And they do not know this young girl who goes by the name of Carmilla, but they offer her to stay with them while she recovers, while her mother goes on and continues on with her travels. And then as Carmilla stays with them, strange occurrences start happening. Strange vampiric occurrences. Honestly, like, I don't think this book was for me, to be honest. I gave it 3 stars. I did really like the writing style because I thought it was pretty. And I liked that Machado, like, really highlighted the queer elements of the story. And it's, like, an interesting story because it's, like, the original vampire story and it's written not by a woman, obviously, but it's written like from the perspective of a woman and with like women as the main characters. So that's interesting. But I think the story was just like too quick for me because it didn't really grab my attention and it didn't really feel fully fleshed out to me personally. Like, I don't think the characters had much of a personality. I just, like, they were all just like really boring and they weren't fully fleshed out people. And I just, like, it kind of dragged for me, if I'm being honest, which I feel like is an unpopular opinion because I feel like everyone loves this. But for instance, like, I bought a mini treadmill in my room and I've been walking for an hour every day as I read. And I could barely even walk while reading this because that's how much of my attention, like, was leaving the book. I just wasn't interested in it, so I felt like I was walking a lot more and it just felt awful. So I will still give this 3 stars. 'Cause again, like, the writing was good. I think it's more of a me problem than anything else. I don't do very well with short form stories. So yeah, that's it. That's it for this video. Those are the vampire books that I have chosen to read for this week. Please let me know what vampire books you like down below. If you've read any of these, if you have same opinions or different opinions, let me know. And I will see you soon with another video. Goodbye.